cults, mind control, sexuality in society. These are the topics for the Frankie Files. I also have periodic interviews of experts and survivors. Facing my own story by writing my memoir was the beginning of finding my voice. Well, I found it. I'll explore multiple writers and articles on these topics new each Tuesday. Listen in. Oh, and I promise not to waste your time. You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com. The Frankie Files podcast is researched, written, recorded, and edited by me, Frankie Tues. Follow me on Reddit at Frankie Tues and on Twitter at Frankie Tues for supplemental discussion. If you would like information on cults in the news, please join my new Substack, frankietees.substack.com. Today, my special guest is Syran Warner, journalist and founder of cultstories.com, The Body International, which is a website where he journals and reports on various cults. We're going to start with his story on the body cult, which is now national news and getting a lot more attention. Syran, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be back with Frankie.
Well, I've been reading your updates on the body cult, and it started in Alaska, moved to Washington, and now has locations for sure in Australia, if not other places. How would you like to get into this today, Syran? I leave this up to you.
I'm trying to think of when we talked last, because so much has happened.
We talked before you released the article on Melissa Parker and Australia. So
putting that out there was kind of a big, a step forward. And, I made, obviously, I do TikTok. So there's I made multiple TikToks about it. And the really insane thing about putting out that article was that the Melissa Parker just showed up on TikTok and showed up on Facebook. I mean, she hasn't done any social media since October of 2014. Really? She was kind of like a ghost. Nobody really knew what was going on. Her kids didn't know what she looked like. Her kids sent messages to me being like, "You don't look like mom anymore." Or commented on her posts on, I guess that was on Instagram, because she created all these social media profiles at the same time, and then was telling the world she wasn't in a cult.
And as a journalist following this story for 6 years about the body cult, which is Christian fundamentalists, if I'm not mistaken, were you convinced it was her creating those profiles?
Well, I don't know if she created the profiles, but it's definitely her face and it's her making the videos, pictures of her from, back in the day. It's just, it's Melissa, but I just don't think most of her life has been as a stay-at-home mom. Mm-hmm. So, and she wasn't ever just a tech person. And I can tell you, because I have a bunch of social profiles, it takes a while to set those up and to post all the content. And, I definitely think she had a bunch of help making those videos.
So the same old thing of being coached how to represent the body cult, not herself.
And they seem
her handlers
scripted to me. There's no edits in her video, and it's really hard to make a 3-minute TikTok without edits. It's very well. She performs well, but I think she's performing, I guess.
And so for those listening who aren't up on the story, you could definitely read about this at cultstories.com. And Syran, one of the things that stood out for me is when I read your post on our cults, on the body cult, and someone commented, and I said something about, wow, no wonder so many of your handles are free Melissa Parker.
Yeah.
This woman hasn't been able to talk to her 6 kids. She's been trafficked now to Australia. her life controlled for how many decades. And someone responded, "It's her choice." And I sent you a message. That was
I remember that. That was sort of,
she's doing it on her own. It's her choice.
Yeah, I mean, that was very clear. I mean, that's very clearly like one of these. I mean, it's like sort of a sock account. There's a bunch on TikTok. Some of them have been identified now, but these accounts, they clearly like know something, or they're very like, or just the people who come out and say like, oh, it's her own choice. Like she can do whatever she wants or whatever. You know, I don't believe those are like trolls, or because if you watch the content or read the content, I don't think there's a whole lot of doubt about like what the organization is, or that like it's hurting these people. This has happened a couple times.
Someone clearly came to do propaganda on the situation that the public is starting because of your viral video on TikTok of the arrest, where one of the members was calling his child property.
When you talk about propaganda too, I mean, another big thing that happened, this was like August 10th, is that the body like hired a newspaper that like a pay-to-play newspaper, which is like its own story, that how corrupt this newspaper is. But to write a story about like a pro-cult story about how Chris was wronged, and you know, the woman who got the kids, and the 12-year restraining order that is, you know, he's got a 12-year restraining order against his ex-wife, like to his ex-wife and kids, for a reason. Paper was saying like how horrible that was. And there was a paragraph about me, that I was like stalking, and I'm a libelous, malicious, nonsensical blogger. Or they didn't call me a blogger, they called me an internet blogger, which I thought was funny because it's so redundant. I mean, that was like definitely a propaganda piece. And it also contains like a hostage video of this woman where she's saying that, you know, I don't want the kids. I've agreed, like Chris can have the kids. The real tell is that she says in the video, like, I am not being forced to say this in any way. And it's like, whoa, like, why would you say that? Like, and why did she make this video in the first place? Because like the legal stuff where she signed over rights to the kids happened like months and months before this. So, you know, 6 months later, she's making this video that, and I just can't believe that this place published that. I mean, it was also like, you know, good for me to tell the story, because then I could like put that video on the internet, explain the situation and what was going on in 2018 when it was made.
What state or country was that paper in that published the propaganda piece pro the body cult?
It's called the U.S. Observer. It's mostly in the Pacific Northwest. It's such an insane rabbit hole to look into the U.S. Observer and read their article. Okay. But yeah, it was published in Oregon. But what they do is like when they publish these articles, they typically, well, maybe not this article. I don't know like how it works as far as like shipping, but they like print this newspaper. There's a story like from this guy I found online about the U.S. Observer, where they will, like, if they're saying like this man is innocent, like even if he's a murderer, they don't care. They'll send copies of the paper to like that jurisdiction, you know, send it to town, and then, you know, then they leave forever. Like,
it's always amazing to me. Like one of the first things that occurred to me as a cult ex-member, they won't go through a lot of trouble to correct just one person speaking out. I was so wrong.
Yeah.
They will go to great lengths to squash all opposition. I've seen it in Scientology and many other small cults too. I'm proud of you for illustrating this in real time. As it happens, this is how it happens. We're looking at, like you say, a hostage video. Now, I just want to get into this quick recap. For me, too, I still have some questions. Melissa Parker, when did she get contact with the body cult before?
I believe it was 2003. I mean, she's one of the first members. I think she's the only remaining female member who was there, like, at the start.
Got it.
I think so. I could be wrong about that, though, because there's this other woman, Ruthie, that I don't know when she joined.
So that would explain the 6 kids over 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think she might have had like 2 kids in the beginning when it started. But I mean, she was very much like a dedicated mother. Like, you know, she never had like a real job, and like when she was in Alaska for all those years.
So in this article, I'm reading off your article, 10 years into her experience with the body, Melissa had her 6th child, a girl. Her family was more tightly knit than ever. The underground church they were all members of was thriving too. The body was accruing resources. Melissa's husband, Craig, had brought more people to the organization after recruiting Chris C. and Carrie C., a young couple with family assets from a packaging business owned by Chris's father that would aid the body. Others were joining the group as well. The body ballooned to about 30 people in America on foreign visas. And this is where you start to update us. How did they traffic this Alaskan-born woman to Australia? It's so complicated.
Complicated, but it's also like it makes sense. I mean, sort of what I conclude that article with is like, you know, the guy the elder in the church who's way older than her that she married, and that's how she's an Australian citizen. His name is Peter Q, and he's another person, like his daughter was in the cult for a long time. Sticks out like a sore thumb. He talks too much. He has a, you know, thick Australian accent. And, you know, these people exist in rural groups and, you know, these just rural communities in America, like, you know, Nikiski, Alaska and Tonasket, Washington. And, you know, he's kind of bad for business. And Melissa Parker is bad for business, too, because, I mean, she, like, her story is just so extreme. I mean, I think it's like a wild goose chase in Australia. Like, they definitely, I've talked to people they've tried to recruit. This husband and wife that knew them best. It's really tough to do Zooms in Australia. Like, we're from, like, I live in Minnesota to Australia. So there's like, I mean, it's like a 16-hour, I mean, it's an insane time difference. First time I talked to the husband who they tried to recruit, I mean, that's how I've like sort of stayed up to date with just to know, like, yeah, they're definitely still like culting around. Well,
so how did you meet the couple recruited in Australia?
I got an email that was forwarded to me in 2020. So I have all these clips of Mark, the cult leader, like doing these sermons, right? And that was sent to me from Australia, or it was forwarded to me, and the email address was this guy in Australia that had forwarded the message. And so after I listened to the clips, I emailed the guy and was like, hey, like, where did you get this stuff from? You know, can I talk to you? We just started emailing for a while, and then we did Zoom.
This battle of informing people is so difficult. I was interviewing Dr. Lalish, and I said, what do you want people to do as far as activism? And she said it's hard because schools won't let us lecture. You and I have talked about this. On cult awareness, or like having a simple cult awareness one sheet about coercion and manipulation and trafficking and cults and religion and political cults. Okay. So she says it's hard because the schools won't let anyone in to talk because they're afraid someone's religion will be offended. They just keep on going. What you're doing using the power of the internet is getting so specific. Here's a few clips of this guy, you know, saying crazy things in his sermons. He probably heard those videos, right?
Sometimes there's like a rapid response. I mean, they were aware of me. Like, I know they were aware of me in 2020 because Peter, this guy in Australia, like, his daughter refused to talk to him after seeing this video that I had made. I heard that from the daughter, and I heard that from these Australian people that like had been recruited that I was in contact with. So they've been aware from the start, but they became like hyper aware once I put out that YouTube video that's like a half hour long about them. And then after, once Chris got arrested and that stuff happened, like then they've just been.
Okay, so Chris B is the guy who got arrested in Washington. During it, he called his daughter property.
Yeah, Chris C.
Some people might not be familiar with the backstory. Please see cultstories.com.
I'd also say, like, my TikTok, I'm just at Syran Warner, and that's kind of blow by blow, and it gets updated. The Land of the Body is the name of the doc on YouTube. I went to Alaska and shot drones over, the area that they were in, and then took all of my audio interviews and a little bit of video. That kind of tells the story.
This one has got my attention so much, as many people are following with you. It's a religious cult that uses scripture to do what it wants in secret meeting places, etc. And one thing you and I are on the same page about is that I don't give an exception for some churches. I find cult behavior in churches, period. A lot of people would like to make a distinction. Well, religions aren't all culty. Well, do they have worship? Do they have rituals? And do they have rules about your sex organs? For me, I don't give religion a pass. As a cult survivor, I was indoctrinated by religion, which involved Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, pick your part kind of religion. And so, I want to applaud you exposing that. And that brings us to the Cultish Podcast. The title, for those of you who are new to this story, Cultish, the podcast, was flying under the radar, and then Syran sniffed it out like a doghound, as usual.
The real insane thing about Cultish is that it's a podcast about cults that is run by a cult. It's a right-wing extremist church called Apologia that is they're a part of this Apologia media, and it's just the most ridiculous thing. To listen to the episodes is so ridiculous, and it has like a ton of fans of the church, but they just like their definition of what a cult is it's silly. Like
you said, they're flying under the radar. They're kind of acting as a cult podcast that would be an activist against cults. I saw a post from Casey of Cult Vault, who I love Cult Vault podcast. I think it was reply to you on Twitter, not sure, that was one of the first podcasts she ever listened to.
Yeah.
Cultish. And then it took her a minute to realize they're weaving in indoctrination of Christian fundamentalism.
Yeah, totally. I had already gotten the tip when I listened to it, like got all these links to, this guy's history, Jeff Durbin, that runs Cultish and Apologia, and it was bad news. These were from like Check My Church was one of the sources, and like that's a really good website. There was just some really crazy stuff in there, and that she had tried to she tried to contact them for questions, and she had a terrible experience with that, and she wrote about it, the author. And just like incident after incident, and there was this other Christian group that they're like super Christian, but they did media stuff, and they're kind of like the first people to expose it. Really, there's definitely like links to that in my article about. Well, I have 2 articles about Cultish, but the other one is like it's called like the 5 elements of a cult with Alexandra Stein. Alexandra Stein is like my favorite cult expert. And, she laid out, like, in legal documents, like, what a cult is. Like, the people in Cultish just had, like, such a ridiculous idea of, like, what a cult actually constituted. This is what they think a cult is. Like, they said, and the definition here is, cults do 4 things: add to Scripture, subtract from the Trinity, multiply the means of salvation, and divide loyalties. Nothing about isolation from your family and separating you from healthy relationships. And
I know that you've revealed in this article why they're recruiting. That's their point of existing in this space.
Yeah, they do recruiting. I mean, the thing that's really messed up that that ends that article is that they have these pamphlets online for like ex-Mormons. It's like, this is why like Mormonism is bad, and this is like this is why this is good. Like, and this is like from the tip I got from the podcast called Indoctrination, which is great. They seem to be like going after people who cult jumping is a real thing, and that seems to be like their target. This is why Mormonism is bad and we're good. And we have I mean, they do a bunch of episodes about like why Mormonism is bad for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
Okay.
But they have actual pamphlets. Like you can buy them, like you can buy 25, you can buy 100. Like these are things you can buy 500. They're making money from this, from their followers. Like they've convinced their followers it's a good idea to buy these pamphlets and give them to Mormons.
Indoctrination makes us do things. And I guess that one was effective. You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com. But you are revealing an underbelly of the whole cult industry, which has gotten me pretty riled up as a cult survivor since I started 6 months ago. I wanted to talk to you about that. Someone is in the cult space, podcasts, articles, whatever, but they're mildly recruiting into another cult, into meditation, into churches. Ours is better. The only reason you had a bad cult experience is because theirs was bad.
What I think about that is when people leave cults, especially like a religious cult or like a yoga cult or something like that, let's say, like you don't leave and the religion is just gone from your head. It evaporates.
That's right.
And you don't, I mean, you don't stop doing yoga if you were like in a yoga cult or something like that. Typically, like these are like parts of your, they make up like who you are. The people who are fresh out of cults are the most vulnerable people to like join another group or something. But then you have like, this, if you actually look at like something like the Cultish or Apologia, the guy is like famous for recording people's confessions, and then when they leave, if they say anything, like he'll just put their confessions of like, like sort of like Catholic confessions, but this isn't Catholic, and then he'll like post their confessions on the internet to like humiliate them.
Okay, now how is that different than the body cult, Syran?
I mean, it's not like it's
the whole blackmailing thing you've been exposing.
Cults do like. I mean, I guess like once you've read enough cult stories, you sort of realize that like they all have like the same DNA. And this like smearing people, blackmailing people, it's super common. After
you published the article, I know you got beat up on your website. Would you talk to me about the tactics used, please? I'd like to get that exposed too.
So what Cultish did is like I went on their page once the article was up, and just started posting on various topics. Like, this is their videos. Like if you actually like wade through this stuff, it's disgusting. So I was writing like, this is what's wrong with this. And then they found the article, and then they posted it, and they made like, oh my God, like look at this crazy person who says we're a cult. Here's how you can find them on the internet. They put links to my stuff. They were joking about it. Like they were taking pictures from my article, like posting that, like their Facebook profile was this image I made of with the hosts, the words control over the host's eyes. And they made that like their background photo. All that stuff is gone now, but
they post it and remove it.
I mean, they sent like a ton of trolls after me. This is just how cool the internet is that there were other people who follow me or whatever that jumped in and started supporting me. We just got in this, like, we got to a point where there were like hardly any of these people. And then like I posted the second article about it maybe 2 days later, and they were just silent. Like in the beginning, there's hundreds of comments disappeared. Can't F around like that and make it like a joke, and then people read the article. Like if you read the article, it talks about this guy secretly recording confessions and stuff like that. What I think is that people were actually sending them like mail. Like, is this true? And of course I have links to other sources. Like, I mean, it's true. Like, all the stuff that I had to say about them, like, was fact checked.
They accused you of going to delete these comments, and you said our policy here is that comments are not deleted.
Even if it's like even if somebody says I'm a terrible person and, you know, the article is disgusting, if they put that comment up there, like, I'm leaving it. It just, you know, as a journalist, like, deleting anything, really. Well, and it tells a story, too. Like, when you read the article and then you see the comments on Instagram, like, it tells a story about, like, what's going on with the loyalty. And, you know, it tells a story that, like, people were sent there. And, like, it has dates and stuff, too. Telling cult stories, I mean, when I write about a cult from 50 years ago, like, I don't get any blowback. Writing about contemporary cults, groups that are still around, you're courting danger. You're courting, like, blackmail. They had tried to start collecting info on you, as we talked about in your first interview with me, episode 21. I remember you revealing to me during that interview that a person you talked to as a source for a different story was feeding info to the leader about you. They were starting a file. They know about me. And same thing, like, I guess, like, with Cultish, where they were, like, definitely trying to get, like, information on me. I mean, again, like we said before, like, Scientology is, like, super famous for this. If you Google, like, Scientology blackmail, Scientology smear, you get a ton of results. And it's so effective. From, like, major publications, too. Like, from, like, Time Magazine, Rolling Stone, places like that. Like, there are very credible journalists who have talked about, who've, you know, interviewed survivors of these kind of tactics. Absolutely. And they make it personal. And when you think about a group that says they're righteous and holy and lifting the vibration of the planet or healing people or practicing the word of God, their behavior has nothing to do with representing righteousness. It is hard, like, to try to compose myself sometimes watching these wars on people. And the war on people is whoever speaks out. You're going to get it. We're going to talk about that, too, in the final segment. One of the other things I'd like to touch on about Cultish Podcast, which was so important, and as a journalist, you remind us to follow the money. So as you followed the money, you found out Apologia Church is the funder of this podcast, Cultish. The thing that's really obvious about Cultish, to me, like, when I first heard about it and I saw the first video that was sent to me by the Indoctrination Podcast, you know, like this anti-choice video. Behind the guy is this giant neon sign with the Cultish logo. Like, it's made, like, there's money. Their media stuff, like, it's really well shot. It's really well edited. Like, I mean, it's so, I mean, I make video, like, I just went to Sanskrit with a small video crew for The Body. That stuff is expensive. Yes, it is. Like, Frankie, do you have, like, a Frankie Files neon sign that's, like, 8 feet long behind you? With my marketing budget and editing budget, I do it all myself? No, I don't. You said it so perfectly before, like, every other podcast, income and donations and monthly memberships will put that money back into the podcast to improve it, to get more guests, to maybe go to some events live. Of course. We're not going to get a vanity light. You know, I doubt, like, Terry Gross has a giant fresh air neon sign in her studio either. Like, it's not even just cult. Like, it's just so unusual. A cult podcast made by a cult. I love this story. I saw the vanity in the leader personally. She wore furs and gold. Oh, not a lot of cars or anything, but there is a lot of vanity in religious leaders. They think they're gods, and once they start believing that, there was a story in the New York Times but there were these preachers in New York City, and this was like a New York Times article, that, like, had their, like, $1 million worth of jewelry stolen, and they made and it's like, what are you doing with $1 million worth of jewelry that you wear when you could be helping like poor people or feeding starving children, but you're spending it on $1 million worth of jewelry for yourself.
I saw that story, and they were live streaming in the chapel with the doors unlocked with all of that gaudiness on, and someone just walked in, beat them, and took it. This is the thing we say, okay, well, the argument is, well, some people see that as a blessing, that they are successful because they love God, and it's a blessing. No, it's a show of vanity.
Yeah, and like in the story of Jesus, he lives in poverty, you know? Like, and that's what they're saying they're emulating. They're trying to, get closer to Jesus.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com. Months ago on Reddit one day, I posted, name a cult happening now in your city that you want exposed. And it was like 300 people right away. I got so much info off of it. And then I saw one of your comments on that post was there's a Minnesota food truck that's actually tied to a cult, and its story here. Several months later, the local Fox News did a story on this. You were way ahead as usual. So tell us what happened. What is the name of this food truck?
I mean, it is a cult. I guess it's hard to say like what's more insane, like a cult podcast run by a cult or a food truck run by a cult. Like they're just, I mean, that's insane. But so food truck though, it's called Bad Rooster. It's run by a woman named Solaire Alari, who used to be known as Lin Young, who is she has a connection with God. She can channel God and other spirits. I mean, I won't spoil everything, but I mean, the video, it's a video by Fox 9 in Minnesota. They did the most. The Daily Beast has an article about it. I mean, this is something, it originally was sent to me on Facebook. Somebody saw the original post that the family members of one of the victims posted that was like, hey, there's this food truck and it's a cult and I haven't seen my mom in 16 years. It has other names. Like there's Bad Rooster's the name of the food truck. There's also like the woman is a minister at the Living Faith Spiritual Community, which is in Minnetonka, Minnesota, very close to Minneapolis and St. Paul. What I would call like the center of the cult is called Soulful Journey. Why so many names is a great question. In this group, everybody legally changes their name. I mean, this is in the Fox 9 piece and the Daily Beast piece as well. My mom, like otherwise known, like this was her old name. Like now she goes by this name. Like a lot of the people try to match their names with the leader. So they're like other Alaris or other Solaires or whatever. But I mean, this is something that cults do is create shell companies, use fake names, have a bunch of names for businesses. Yep. And the idea of like asking people to change their names, but like enough cults do that it's a pattern and it's something you can say, like, why would you want people to change their names? Well, these people that like haven't talked to their mom in 16 years, like it makes it harder to find her and contact her.
Okay, so how many people are in this soul journey?
Soul Journey or Bad Rooster. Like a lot of groups, like it's very secretive. I think only a few members have been like sort of outed. There's concerned family members who have contacted the news. That's how this started, and it's how it's sort of evolving. And that's how like people have been found. And then somebody sees the Fox 9 article and their sister is in the group and they go, holy crap.
Right.
Then they call the newspaper or they call Fox 9 or whatever. I know just from like trying to suss out like everybody who's in the body, it can be very difficult to find out like who's in and who's not unless like their family members are speaking out or unless, ex-members are the best resource because the ex-members who speak out and they can say, well, there was 10 people or there were 100 people, I haven't read anything about the Bad Rooster food truck, like doing anything to recruit new members. It's solely a like financial vehicle to fund the cult. They self-reported, like they're filing defamation lawsuits right now. And they just self-reported that they make $9,000 a day when their food truck is operating, which I think is exaggerated. This woman, Solaire, like, there's articles about her from like the early 90s. She traveled around the country like channeling spirits. She gave these seminars where she would channel spirits. Like in Minnesota, we saw like an explosion of food trucks downtown, places, you know, any kind of festival, going to be like a bunch of food trucks. So like it's good business. It's humorous to me that like this cult leader decided to go into the chicken game. Yellow Deli, 12 tribes.
Everyone's like, oh man, that food's good. Too bad to find that out. Delicious vegetarian meal with a little cult on the side.
Do you know about the cult that was like they made music and the guy, Father Yod, would like hang glide? Or he died hang gliding accident. The Source family is what they were called. Was mostly like in the 70s. They started out as a popular restaurant, like a vegan restaurant in Los Angeles. At this restaurant in Los Angeles, you know, stars were going there. Like Woody Allen like makes a joke about like eating at this vegan restaurant in one of his movies. It comes from the Source family. And it's very similar to the restaurants that the 12 tribes operate. There are cities where like you could walk into one of these 12 tribes restaurants like today.
There's a 2012 documentary about the Source family.
Yeah.
About Jody, Willie, and Maria Demopoulos.
I believe it's on Amazon Prime. That's how I watched it. You have a connection to God. It makes you like attractive. Like you have all the answers. Like that's women sleep with the leaders. I mean, that was what was going on in that Wild Country documentary about the Rajneesh or whatever.
You can either be a rock star or a religious leader.
And in the Source family, it's like they're doing both. I mean, they interview like Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins, who's like, oh yeah, their music is great. Like I love the music that they were.
My sister and I were musical group, a duet that created music for our temple. I'm trying to get my hand on this tape, a cassette tape. We were called the Daughters of Isis. We sang about themes that we were being indoctrinated on, like Osiris, Isis, the beginning and the end. We were pretty good musically. She's an amazing guitarist. I have not even begun on my podcast to explore this. I'm researching hypnotism and music and how it's used. And let me tell you, I'm so disappointed about what I've experienced. Having started to research this, mesmerization takes place when you chant or
chanting,
do repetitive singing, and why religions and cults use it so much, and political too, right? Chanting.
Okay, so I have an article on my website about the music of cults. This is one of these things that just blew my mind. It's like there's a DJ in New York at this really cool radio station called WFMU who has a show every Tuesday night called The Music of Mind Control. Most cults have some sort of like music involved. The article I wrote about it, which includes a bunch of music, is called WFMU's Music of Mind Control is the greatest like radio show in cult history or something. Wow. He like made like art like specifically for the article. The guy's awesome. It's really esoteric, but it's fascinating. I mean, he's got like a recording like in Jonestown, they had a music group called the Jonestown Express. And there's music from that. There's like recordings of a band at Jonestown. Ekin Carr makes all this new age music. There's a lot of new age music.
The band Morningland had Shiva was the name of their full peace band. They had like 12 members.
Wow.
So they were totally into indoctrination through music. So they would have these concerts, everybody pays for. All the members who already pay again. And also they would try to get this band Shiva at political events for congressmen and stuff in California. There was so much going on there. They were accused of bribery. The lawyer for Morningland gave one of the congresspeople a $10,000 check which was not marked as a donation at one of the events that Shiva played at. So it was like,
They almost went down to the improper donation?
Correct.
Okay.
It was for bribery.
That's amazing.
There's a story there.
Was the music like was Shiva like was it good music?
Yeah. It was rock. It was very good.
It's really interesting.
I know.
In the documentary, the thing I made that's on YouTube, Land of the Body, like I used Marshall Applewhite, the leader of Heaven's Gate. Like when he was a college professor, he like did a music class and they made this music, and there's a couple recordings that like survived, because I mean it's a long time ago, like that was in the 60s, I think. And all the music I use in that documentary is Marshall Applewhite's music. Like definitely like sort of like chant. I don't even know how to describe it.
It's kind of hypnotizing. It's like droning almost, right?
Yes,
especially for the new age ones. When I talked to Dr. Lalish about Heaven's Gate, and you and I had chatted one time about Heaven's Gate, what she said was so intriguing. She had so much knowledge. She had been interviewing them for her book, Bounded Choice, before they committed suicide. And they had literally said over and over, she was telling us on that interview, we're not going to commit suicide. And then they did. So, like all these families were so shocked because they thought that the situation was in hand, and it wasn't. She studies him and her so extensively that you will love the book. You've got to read Bounded Choice.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. I mean, that's all I read is cult literature.
He was the incarnation of Christ, and he's dope. T was God. And he was the Christ coming back to finish what he wasn't finished 2,000 years ago. So going back to your statement recently, you are saying, religion, Christianity specifically, has done so much damage. And I can now tell you, because I got it straight from her in the book, 39 people are dead because he thought he was Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that doctrine doesn't hurt people, right?
I mean, I guess like with Heaven's Gate, it's really complicated because it's like it's this melting pot of different views. Like if you watch the exit interviews, like nobody talks about Jesus. Nobody talks about God. Like,
no, that was just for internal knowledge. Correct.
Yeah. I mean, it's like,
you're correct.
There's just like so many different, I mean, and that's kind of what makes it fascinating is Doe and T like had like, bad, the reason why they became Doe and T is they like wanted to escape their lives because there was like trauma. But I mean, is fascinating to like learn more about their lives.
And in the book, she shows how they first met. They went to a campground in Oregon and had this meeting of minds together and got their doctrine together. And then they went out and started recruiting. And part of their doctrine included saying that the next level was bodiless. So we need to become non-humans to get to the next level.
The bodiless thing happened when T died because she wasn't supposed to die. So then it became like they were all supposed to be like magical creatures or whatever. And then when she died, then that's when Marshall Applewhite Doe was like, we can transcend the earth.
Yes.
We don't need these physical bodies. Yes. And and then eventually 39 people died, or I guess like 38 people died. 38 victims of Marshall Applewhite.
We don't need these bodies, and the spaceship was going to pick us up before, but now we've got to kill ourselves to get to the Hale-Bopp comet.
Yeah.
These reaches in concepts, she breaks it down in Bounded Choice like never before. It's really quite amazing because, the public's view is always, oh, how could you believe this? Well, that's not how they started.
No.
It's incremental. You believe this, and then you believe this, and you inch towards something else. And all of a sudden, you're like in outer space mentally.
There's a particular like sadness to Heaven's Gate that I find really interesting because people are like, how could these people ever join this group with these insane ideas about, space aliens and whatnot? There's like a particular, like, hey, like, you could believe there was something out there. Like, he's a charismatic leader. Maybe not to you or I, but to some people. Hey, you can leave your life behind and like join this, and like, magical things are going to happen, basically, or magical thinking. It's depressing too to think like people want to like leave their lives behind and their families behind for this. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that happens in a lot of cults, but yeah, it's just it's particularly like, these were like good people. They weren't religious fanatics. They just got caught up in this like fantasy.
What you just said, magical thinking. One of the problems with being a cult kid is we were taught to believe in this type of magical thinking. They would say, oh, look, the food has lasted all night. It's been a manifestation. Then everyone would just act, and then everyone would get on board and be like, yes, it's a manifestation. Like, it's literally BS. And then watching everyone play act around the BS, this is the cult thinking. And when we leave a cult, then I have had to tell myself, like, nothing is a solve-all. Get over it. There's no magical answer to anything. Life's difficult. We got to get through it the best we can. No one's going to swoop down and wave a magic wand. You won't feel any ailments, and you'll be young, and everyone will love you.
People are not idiots who join cults. I mean, there's like an appeal. You were just talking about, like, it's a miracle, and how, this is a cure-all. Like, there is no cure-all. You're right. But like, wouldn't it be great if there was?
And so let me sell you that idea.
Yeah, I mean, but like to you or I, like, if somebody said, like, I can solve all your problems, and here's like this solution, here's this like elixir, all your problems, you won't be lonely.
The best quote I've ever heard so far on that is from Robert J. Lifton. Yeah. He writes that we have a death anxiety as humans. We do not know what's going to take place after we die. So we have a seeking of that knowledge. To me, that is the number one exploited yearning, feeling that cults and religions get down on with all of us. I have the answers. No, you don't. Nobody knows. That's part of the human condition. We do not know our creator, and we do not know where we go when we die.
No, he's great. He coined the term brainwashing.
The Chinese.
He's a super, super interesting guy. You say you're growing up, 1,000 years ago or something, and like your child dies or something. Like, you want answers. Like, human beings want answers for death. If somebody I knew was murdered, like, I would want answers for like what happened. Like, the search for answers is part of the like religious experience broadly.
Yes. That's why what I love about Bounded Choice is she says true believers. We're exploited. We want to believe. There's a special feeling when you look up at the sky and you see the stars, that feeling of wonder that you get. Well, let's give it a name, God. Let's say there's a spaceship coming. You could just go with it. It's that void, that very void that cults and religions tried to fill, and they have no business trying to do so. We're all in this together. Sorry, you're not my master.
It's understandable why people want answers. It's understandable why people want there to be an afterlife. The stuff cults are made of that is like appealing, how you get members, is like there's always like, a rainbow at the end. Like you said, a cure-all.
It's that kind of thinking, that I've had to manage since I left. This guy is not the answer to everything, or this job is not the answer to everything. I'm still going to have to deal with some of my emotional problems. There is no answer to everything. Sorry to ruin your milk and cookies. You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com.
Hi everyone.
Howdy.
Hi Frankie. Hi Syran. What's the latest on the story you're following?
They released like a sort of like an attack article in this bogus newspaper that they paid for. And then, I mean, the real latest is like the court records of the guy who was like calling his daughter property, Chris C. Like his federal case, like those court documents. I've just been poring over those for the past few days because there's just a lot of documents in there. And then I went to Tonasket, where the cult is based, which was a wild time. But I went to the courthouse and going through property records and court records right now. I guess like I try to keep it up to date on TikTok or other. I mean, it's a lot of it is just like information gathering, though. There hasn't been like an earthquake in the case, I would say. Like nothing like the arrest, but it keeps going. And now there's this like woman who's missing who has 6 kids. That's not Melissa Parker. That's her sister. And that's pretty recent. Yeah, Becky Stanton or Becky Parker. I have not been able to find a trace of her since 2020 when she signed a mortgage. That's like the last update about like in her life. Like nothing, no pictures, no social media, no. In a court document, it says that this woman, Katie, who wrote an affidavit, says that there was a woman who was kicked out with 6 kids and she was able to like leave with like one son thing. But then I've also heard that like she's gotten back into it from another reporter. Their house is for sale right now on Zillow. You can look at their house, which has beautiful like $600,000 house with her husband Derek's art is like in the basement, like in one of the photos. So it's like 100% their house, and their names are on the mortgage, I guess, property records. But that's the stuff that's new, I guess. And I'm going to keep releasing this stuff. I have an article about Becky that's pretty much done that I'm just going to put online that I'm sure he'll hear some blowback from the cult.
Just to add, I think when you started posting about the group, you were saying your approach was different because you were an observer and you were looking through data and online records to try and uncover what was going on. Is that right? And if so, have you got any tips for anyone else who's trying to do the same thing? Because typically stories come about because of a survivor. But what your approach, if that's how it is very different. Have you got any tips for anyone who's following traces of information to get to what's really going on?
I mean, survivor or not, I would say, I use a service called Truth Finder that if you're like looking people up, you'll find, because they do all this like these ads on the internet, and it's like $25 or something. But the secret of Truth Finder is that when you go to cancel it, they do this like, wait, you could have all these services for $10. So I pay $10 a month for Truth Finder, which will give you who their relatives are, who their associates are, what their like known addresses are, what their court records are, where you can find like who owned a house, if they have a lien on the property, if they went through a bankruptcy. That information is in there. What businesses do they own? What are associated businesses? It's not like 1,000%. Like sometimes people have similar names and records, or maybe records like you'd have one bankruptcy, but it would be recorded 3 times or something. Like you got to pay attention. But then there's like state records. Business records vary by state as far as what they will release. Like some states are really good, like Washington State, you can pull out of documents. Alaska, these are places that I have. But then there's other places like in Oklahoma, you have to pay for records, and that's a pain in the butt.
Is the police records on there too?
Oh yeah, I would say this is another thing. Is you go to a county's, if you look up county records, like and go to the police division, you can. I've gotten a bunch of records this way where it's like hey, like on this date, I know this happened. It was in the police blotter. Like, I want the report for that. Like, I have a bunch of like body cam footage. I didn't pay for any of that body cam footage. I just wrote a request because I pulled the police report and it said they were wearing body cams, and then it was available.
And they emailed it to you?
Yeah, it's sent in an email. Some places are different. Like they want to send you like data discs or whatever, like if you want court audio. But I mean, this is something that like I just learned through trial and error, is that you can kind of get documents. And this is another thing you can do, is like the cult leader in Tonasket that I'm following, Mark B. I just talked to the police department and said, I want every police report that this guy is in from 2018 to right now. It took a little longer, but you know, it's public information, and they legally have only like so many days to send it to you. You can learn all kinds of stuff from public records. And I mean, some of the public records, like these affidavits that I got from Tonasket, or from Okanagan County where Tonasket is, like in the affidavits, it's like, I was a member of a cult. The name of the cult was the Body. Like, this is the leader of the cult. This is the leader of the cult's wife. Like they state specifically in court documents. I mean, I feel like at some point I'm going to publish something about how to get court documents, how to get cheapest way to get your hands on this stuff, because I think it's valuable for, I mean, especially for like survivors who want to know what's going on, or journalists. Pacer is where I'm getting like the federal. That's where you get federal court documents. Pacer, PACER. That's like the government-run website. Remember before when I was saying like that this guy wanted like silver for every second he was wrong? Like that's from Pacer. I just got that yesterday.
Okay.
And anybody can use it. You do have to, filling out the paperwork is a pain in the butt. Like, the government websites are terrible. Another thing I would say, though, is like, if you have confusion with how to pull court documents or how to get information, police reports, whatever, they always have a phone number, and they always have some receptionist who will tell you, you know, this is how you do it. This is what you need to write down. Here's the form.
So this is stuff we can do without having to do a Freedom of Information Act or anything like that.
Yeah, Freedom of Information Act request is like pretty extreme. Like, you can find information you can't find elsewhere. The Body had a business called SATEC. Like, if you Google SATEC, you're not going to find much information, although there is one really funny Google review. If you go to the state of Alaska's website and look up their business search, you can do the search there. It's not you won't see it in Google search results. If you do the search on the state of Alaska's business website, you can find tons of information about SATEC. You can see a bunch of cult members' names on their business documents. You can see, you know, articles of disillusion, biannual reports, the initial filing. Like if you know that a cult has a business, like say like this Bad Rooster food truck, like I haven't looked up their business records, but they exist and they're public. Most states you don't have to pay for them. Some states you do.
This is what makes you a good journalist.
It's learning. Just like, you know, I was smashing my head against the wall for such a long time trying to figure this stuff out. But then it really, like, for me, it came down to like actually like making phone calls and finding out what I needed to do from the actual like county clerk or whatever. But anybody can do that. And again, like I said, I think Truthfinder, I've used a whole bunch of people finding services that are useful in some ways or another. But you have to sign up and then cancel your membership to drop it.
When you were in Tonasket recently, did you speak to members of the Body that are there?
At this point, it's gone so far, I wouldn't feel comfortable meeting a member in person. I mean, I talked to people in the orbit, like the sort of like associates, people who had gone to meetings before. I mean, I've interviewed people who, like contemporary people who I believe are in the cult on the phone or through, you know, Zoom or whatever. but not like, I wouldn't, I honestly wouldn't do an interview with them in person unless it was like a very controlled environment.
It's dangerous.
They're gun nuts, they're sovereign citizens, and they're in a cult that doesn't like me at all. That was the scary thing about Tonasket too. Like when you drive out to the property, because we like flew drones over the new compound, you don't have cell phone service there. 0 bars, nobody's cell phone works. That makes it like extra scary.
Well, they did that on purpose, huh?
I think that they're in the middle of nowhere is on purpose. It's just one of these things like all over. We drove kind of all over Okanagan County where they were. Like we stayed, I think, like 25 minutes away from the town of Tonasket itself most of the time. We stayed in a couple places, but you drive outside of these small towns and you just don't have, your cell phone doesn't work. I don't know what you do if you got like a flat tire or something, or or you didn't have a spare, I guess. But like, if you were in some kind of, I mean, we used walkie-talkies.
Wow, this is getting interesting, Syran.
It's a wild story, I guess.
Yes.
I mean,
it's definitely a wild ride.
I guess what makes like the story of the body and my work to me, like how it's gotten to this place, is I've just been doing it forever. I've been doing it for such a long time, and there's always something new if you keep following it. If you keep going down the rabbit hole, you're going to find new stuff. Like for instance, like there was a documentary about Nexium called The Vow, a couple of years ago. All these survivors and the story and all this tape. And now there's like the second season of The Vow is about to come out in October because like they just kept the cameras on. They kept following the story. They have a whole new season about Nexium, which has been done. The cult has been over for years. I hope it gets big enough that like it's impossible for them to recruit. That's kind of the goal. Yep. Story gets to the point where they can't, they're like famous. They can't recruit anymore. Then like that's when I sort of feel like I've done my job.
From the cult kid. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing it.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it.
I know it's not easy, Syran, what you're doing.
The truth is that, like, I just hit a point, like, I'm just kind of like an obsessive, like, when I have, like, a creative project, like, I just, like, can't stop until, just want to keep, like, going and keep making it, it work. Like, I've only had, like, I mean, I was a terrible musician, but I used to try to work on music, and like, I had to buy like just from, I was broke all the time. I mean, I'm still broke all the time, so I dump all my money into this, but like dumping money into music because it's like, I just know like this is interesting to me and I just care about it. And this to me is kind of like, you get to be creative too. Like when you're on a video shoot or you're writing an article or you're doing like the research part is the hard part. But it is really fun. Like making TikToks is fun to me.
Doing this in real time with contemporary cults is different. We're attempting, I do it too on my show. And there is, like you said, in real time, backlash sometimes. It's pretty hard to take. You just have to have your audience prepared to help you. And that's the hard part, is getting to the audience through the harassment of the cult you're trying to speak out against.
One thing that I guess has changed for me is like in the beginning I was like so afraid of the backlash, and now like as long as my safety isn't a concern, like I love the backlash. Like when they wrote that article and called me a nonsensical internet blogger, it like made me smile. They're just sort of like exposing themselves. Like when they fight back, they're making it more clear that they are a cult.
So it's sort of like when I started with this, the only Morning Land post was like 7 years old or 10 years old. Now, when you Google the word Morning Land Church, you'll see a lot of information that I've put up. Suddenly, they have a website, a one page. And then, yes, that's like a little reaction that I'm so happy about, because it's like, yeah, you better try to represent yourself, because I'm putting the information out there, the truth about what's going on in this group. And then they updated another intentional community website, which is on someone else's post. It was 2 months ago that they did that, and I'm like, as I expose info, they're being forced to try to represent themselves. They've been trying to be sort of like the body, cult, overt, undercover, recruitment, etc. They just want to not exist so they can move in the dark. And these simple posts about my family's experience has forced their hand enough to make a website and to update their other profile 2 months ago.
Your story will break too if you just keep doing it. Like eventually you'll strike a nerve with like, I guess like you keep doing it, but I've given the body like a Google problem. Like if you Googled the body, right, Alaska to Nasket, like if you used all the keywords, like when I started, you would find nothing. There's a Newsweek article. Now there's like my website is the first result now. And there's like pictures of these people and YouTube videos, and it just goes on and on. And this podcast is going to be on the internet. Like that's another thing that will be a Google result. And you just give them like that sort of like negative press or whatever. I mean, you could look up like Scientology and like the first result is going to be like, hey, we're Scientology. We're great. And maybe the third result is like, this is a cult. Like handing over a Google problem is like a good thing to aspire to, I guess. It's not that difficult. I just started a Squarespace is how this started. That's just like the website, like creating a web presence, you know. And anybody could start like, you could, if you're like a survivor too, you could start an anonymous like WordPress, or like there's free options out there. Tell your story, and it might seem insignificant, but it's not, because, well, I don't really want to join this group anymore since I read this story that's horrible about these people being separated from their family members.
Syran Warner can be found at cultstories.com. He covers the body, cult, and many other topics, is an excellent journalist. And we appreciate you being here today, Syran, with us.
It was fabulous to be. I mean, I love your show. I love having these discussions with you. It's like, I
know. We could go all day, Syran. We appreciate you having this time for us. I look forward to airing this on my podcast.
Yeah. I look forward to the next thing you do, because you make cool content. You talk to interesting people.
Thank you. Vice versa.
Yeah, thank you.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com.